Like during this time period right here, do you understand that the law was given in the book of Exodus and the book of Leviticus? Leviticus was written during that 9 month during that 9 month period. Everybody understands that? And remember, we were also talking about there's 2 generations that are described in the book of Numbers. So it's the first generation who received the law at Mount Sinai. The first generation, in other words, the ones that refused to go into the land of Canaan 1 year later, they just refused to go in. And so, but they had the law. They had the law of the 10 Commandments that was given in Exodus 20 all the way through the book of Leviticus. And Leviticus was written during that first year. Don't know exactly when, but when Moses was up on the mountain, God gave him the law. And that was in Exodus and Leviticus. That was given to the first generation. Okay. So this is the book of Exodus, from Exodus 14 to Exodus 40. Y'all see that? Any questions on that? Okay. The book of, and it took 1 year. Okay, so if the time frame for the book of Exodus and Numbers is 40 years, and the book of Exodus takes 1 year, then how long does the book of Numbers take? Yes?
39.
39 years. Lauren, would you agree with, were you going to say that? Destiny, do you see that? So in other words, 40 minus 1 year is 39 years. So this is the book of Numbers. $39 years. Okay. So anyway, Numbers 1 through 36. And this is, I know what we were having, what you guys are being confused with last year. The first year in Numbers is the second year of the 40 years. You'll see that? Because, and so then just for like a quick review, from this time frame right here all the way to here, this is Numbers chapters 1 through 14. I mean, it's only 1 year. Numbers 1 through 14 only takes 1 year because from Mount Sinai, you know, there's the census, you know, God numbers the men. In other words, the men are drafted. If you're over 20 years old, 20 and over, you have been drafted into the army and you're going to go fight in Canaan. But remember, at the end of that first year, they refused to fight. They refused to go into the land. So the punishment is that they're all going to die in the wilderness, okay? And then there's going to be from chapters 15 through 19, that's a period of 37 years. 1 year for Exodus, 1 year for Numbers, and then the last generation is going to be 1 year. It's chapters 20 through 34, and it only takes 1 year. So 1 year plus 1 year plus 37 years plus 1 year is how many?
40 years.
40 years, right? 1 year for Exodus, 1 year in Numbers 1 through 14, 1 year for Numbers 20 through 34, and chapters 15 through 19 cover 37 years. But there's only 4 chapters talking about it because basically God was just marching them around in the wilderness until they all died off. I mean, the first generation. So what I'm going to ask you to do on your paper is to be able to regurgitate that time frame and just explain this time frame to me. So just like, say, the book of Exodus, from chapters 14 to 40, took 1 year, took 3 months to get to Sinai. They were there for 9 months receiving the law. And then the book of Exodus is over. You know, like the book ends with the tabernacle has been erected, the glory of God has come down. That's what it says in chapter 40. And then for the book of Numbers, it's 39 years.
Is it Exodus 14 through 40? Because my notes from last week say 12 to 40.
And it should be 14. Because if I do 12, that's like, they're not really in the wilderness yet. They're actually celebrating the Passover. And so I get, if you put 12 through 40, 14 is when they actually cross the Red Sea, and then they're officially in the wilderness. So I know I said 12 because the plagues are, well, this is the last plague. They're having their first Passover and stuff. Okay, and what I'm going to ask you to do is to describe, the first generation was numbered, you know, during that first year. Remember, this is just, this is 1 year. 1 year. From right here to here is 1 year. So 1 year in Exodus, Numbers 1 through 14 is 1 year. Numbers 15 to 19 is going to be a total of 37 years. If I just put a 37 there. Am I getting up so much information it's getting confusing? So 1 year, 37 plus 1 is 40. So describe, like say in Exodus chapter 14, when you're talking about the generation that crossed the Red Sea, they received the law, which was Exodus and Leviticus. Put Leviticus. Remember, Leviticus is a book of the law. The first generation, they crossed the Red Sea. They received the law at Mount Sinai, which is Exodus and Leviticus. And then all the way through Numbers 14, that talks about the first generation of Israelites. They crossed the Red Sea. They're the ones that said, we will not go into the promised land. They said, oh, would to God we had died in this wilderness. God, you're trying to kill our children. We want to go back to Egypt. Let's stone Moses and Aaron. Let's go back to Egypt. And remember, then God appears and says, have it your own way. You'll die in the wilderness. And your children, whom you said, I couldn't take care of, they will be the ones who will enter the land. So the second generation is highlighted in Numbers chapter 20 all the way through 34. So anyway, it's important that you write about the first generation who crossed the Red Sea and received the law at Mount Sinai. They refused to go into the land. That's got to be in your paper. Yes?
Can I just clarify? So the first generation is Exodus 14 through Numbers 19, and then the second is...
Well, the first generation, just say, in Numbers 15 through 19, the first generation is dying off. But God is pretty much through with the first generation after Numbers 14. So from Exodus 14 to through Numbers 14, God was holding the first generation responsible, but the first generation said, we refuse to go into the land because there's giants in the land. Okay. If you want to talk about the spies and stuff, you can, but I'm mostly interested that you just understand the overall time frame. So you got that, Oscar? Mm-hmm. Okay. You're smiling, so I know that I got this down, right? Or you're eating candy, one or the other. Eating candy. Oh. You guys got to keep eating candy. Your committee, you're going to have to eat it all the way through class because you're going to crash the second or third hour. Okay. Any more questions on the first generation? Okay, the first generation, God is through with them. in Numbers 14, and during that 37-year period, in other words, Numbers 15 through 19, the first generation is dying off in the wilderness, and the second generation is growing up. So they're basically approximately 2 to 3 million people are God is waiting for them to die off in the wilderness. In other words, they're just dying. God is just letting them die of old age and stuff, and then they're just basically being buried in the wilderness. In Numbers, starting with Numbers chapter 20, that's the year that, the very last year. This is the 40th year in the wilderness, or the 39th year of the book of Numbers. Does everybody understand that? Because Numbers is 39 years. Obviously, the very last year, if you're just talking about the book of Numbers, it's the 39th year. But for their 40 years in the wilderness, it's the 40th year in the wilderness, when you count Exodus and Numbers. God is focused on the second generation, getting them ready to go into the land. Okay, and even though in this class it's not important, but God deals with this second generation from Numbers chapter 20 all the way through the book of Joshua. But this is the Pentateuch, and Joshua's not in the Pentateuch. It's the first generation, that conquers the land, so that's actually the book of Joshua also. But since it's the Pentateuch, we stop it right there. Okay, very important. So in other words, this will be on your paper and on the final. The very last month, in other words, the 12th month of the 40th year. Anybody know what happened that month?
Deuteronomy was written.
You didn't raise your hand, but go ahead, Oscar.
Deuteronomy was written.
Deuteronomy was written. Yes. Deuteronomy was written. Good. Deuteronomy, D-E-U-T. Deuteronomy was written. It was written during that last month. So you need to know that. And Deuteronomy, it literally means second law. So the first generation got the law. They got the law in Exodus 14 through 40 and Leviticus all the way through the book of Leviticus, 27 chapters in Leviticus. And the second generation got extra law in the book of Deuteronomy. And it only took a month for them to get it. Okay, so if you can remember that, so when you write about one incident on why the first generation didn't go into the land, if you say the reason they didn't go into the land is because they were, first of all, you could say they were faithless, but they were scaredy cats. They couldn't trust God to bring them into the land. They said the giants are going to kill us. The Anakim are there. Remember, what does Anak mean? Remember what that means?
Descendants of Anak.
Well, Anak. Yeah, what does Anak mean? We made a joke about it last week. In fact, I used Isaac and Jeff. Somebody else used Jeff. Long neck, right? Okay. It's a good way to remember, right?
Sorry, you can't use me. I have a stubby neck.
Huh?
A stubby neck.
You have a weightlifter or a wrestler's neck. You're so bulging with muscles there that, okay. You've seen some, no, not fat. You've seen football players where their shoulder muscles literally go up to their head?
That's retarded.
Okay.
Basically, calls you retarded. It's okay.
Okay. Okay. Nobody in this class is retarded. Everybody here is smart. Okay.
As do I.
You have brain issues? Okay. You're forced to study? In other words, yeah. I am too. I have that problem too. So the second generation goes into the land, and I'll give you an incident. You got to write about some incident that happened to the second generation, and I'm going to give you one today that you can write about if you want. There's two instances in the second generation we're going to talk about. The first one will be they got sick of manna, and they complain against Moses and God sends fiery serpents among them. Moses he puts a brass serpent or a brass snake on top of a pole and says, everybody who looks at it, who's been bitten by a snake, will live. I'd say that's like in Numbers 21. And then there's the long 3 or 4 chapter story of Balaam, trying to curse Israel. You can either mention that or write about that, or just mention the event. And one thing, remember, God took a census in Numbers chapter 1. He numbered the men being drafted into the army. Numbers chapter 1. The second generation, men being drafted into the army, Numbers chapter 26. I'd write that down. Huh? That's the second. It's the census for the second generation. Okay. So Numbers is a book that talks about 2 generations. The generation that was faithless didn't go into the land because they got obsessed with how big the giants were, and they refused to go into the land. So they died in the wilderness. The second generation, yes, Kenan.
What chapter did you say the census of the second generation was?
26.
Okay.
Numbers 26. And if you look if you just happen to everybody, flip your Bible open to Numbers chapter 26, if you have your Bible here. So open to Numbers chapter 26. And just a cursory reading, you'll say, like for instance, Numbers 26:19. The sons of Judah were and Onan, and they were numbered 76,500. So in other words, on your final, I might ask you to say, compared to the first generation and the second generation in the census, in the first census, Judah had this many people. In the second census, for the second generation, Judah had this many, men ready for war. I might ask a question like that. In other words, you turn from chapter 1 to chapter 26, you look at Judah, and you say, well, in chapter 1, Judah has this many men in the army, but in chapter 26, the second generation, they've only got this many men in the army. I might ask a question like that if I'm looking to ask, say, a hard question or something like that. I would consider that a hard question because you're going into the book and you're making a comparison between Judah in chapter 1 and the tribe of Judah in chapter 26. Or I just might ask you, what was the total of the army in chapter 1? What was the total number of people in the army in chapter 26? Which, if we looked, Numbers chapter 26, verse 51. Numbers 26, 51. These are those who were numbered of the children of Israel, 601,750.
Wait, 50?
730.
Oh,
Okay, that was a trick question because I read it wrong, huh? Okay. That doesn't say 50, it says 30. I know that's what you were thinking, right? Sharp eyes, you caught that. So in the first generation, was it 603,550, something like that? So, and I won't ask you to do any math problems where what is the difference in men between the first generation and the second generation? Well, obviously you subtract the second generation, subtract the smaller number from the larger number, and you get how much the army shrinks. So it's going to shrink by a couple of thousand, something like that. I probably won't ask. I might do that as like an extra credit or something like that. I will give extra credit questions on the final, and I encourage you to try to do them. Because if you mess up on, say, some of the other questions, you can make up the points. And if you get all the questions right, you can actually end up with more than 100% on your final to make up, say, for other points that you lost. So I highly recommend you put something down for the extra credit. Just the fact that you tried to answer them will be worth something. any questions on what your paper is going to be about? If you write about an incident that happens here, like I say, and the first thing I'm going to talk about is probably, I'll probably mention that Miriam died the 40th year and Aaron died the 40th year. If you want to make that be your incident that you talk about with the second generation, that's fine. Numbers chapter 20, Miriam and Aaron die. Does anybody know who Miriam and Aaron are? Raise your hand. If you know who Miriam and Aaron are, raise your hand. Aaron, do you know who Miriam and Aaron are? Okay.
Aaron.
Okay. Did I call you Aaron? Okay. Awesome. No, did I? Okay. Okay, Isaac, who? You tell me who Aaron is, and Destiny, can you tell me who Miriam is?
Aaron was his older brother.
Okay, and high priest, right?
She was someone's wife, wasn't she?
Moses' sister.
Sister.
She was the
She
one,
died.
and she dies in Numbers chapter 20.
Yes.
Okay, and we'll look at that again. She was also the one, if you remember in the earlier incident in the book of Exodus, she was the one that watched Moses float down the Nile River in the basket. Okay, that was her. Okay. Okay. Any questions on what your paper's about? And I'm going to leave it open-ended enough and not give you too many restrictions, so that you can, if you use your imagination, be scriptural when you use your imagination. But I'm not going to tell you how to start it or how to end it. But you do need the chronology. It started in 1445 BC. It ended in 1405 BC, or somewhere along those lines. 40 years difference. Exodus 14 to 40 is 1 year. The book of Numbers is 39 years. The first generation in the book of Numbers is 1 year, and it takes up 14 chapters. And then you're going to give a reason why they wouldn't go into the land, the giants, And I would ask, put down a scriptural reference, Numbers 14 something, they refuse to go into the land. So put down a reference, like for instance, why do they not go into the land? Numbers 14. So take a look at Numbers 14. Like in my Bible, it says, Israel refuses to enter Canaan. That's what the chapter says. So anyway, if you just looked in Numbers chapter 14, whatever verse you decide to quote. If you look, like, say, at verses 22 and 23, I mean, it's as good as any to quote. You can say that they rebelled because the spies gave a bad report. Well, if you say that, if you read the chapter, just tell me what verses those are. The spies gave a bad report, so like it might be verses umpty ump to umpty ump. That's not what you put in your paper. You put the actual verse numbers. But like, for instance, when God actually appears, Numbers 14:22. God says, because all these men have seen my glory and the signs which I did in Egypt and in the wilderness, and have put me to the test now these 10 times and have not heeded my voice, they certainly shall not see the land of which I swore to their fathers, nor shall any of those who rejected me see it. Okay. You might even want to mention that, who were the 2 exceptions in that first generation that got to go into the land? What would you say? Oscar.
Joshua and Caleb.
Joshua and Caleb. Caleb the dog, and Joshua the Savior, right? Jesus, yeah. Joshua, Jesus, okay. Okay, so you would all know that, like on the final, that who were the 2 people who were the exceptions who did not die out, the two people who survived in the first generation. If I ask you a question, like here's a trick question, if I ask you what gender are they, what would you say? They're male, they were both men. No women survived out of the first generation. Well, we could say their wives survived, right? Okay. I would say that their wives survived because well, we don't know. But it's a good chance that they did because I know later on, like Caleb, they had concubines and everything too. Which is strange. They just received the law. God said one wife, but maybe they're reading the fine print. Well, God didn't say anything about concubines or anything like that, so who knows? Okay, any questions on what your paper is going to be about? Anything that you want clarified? Destiny, any questions? Jeff?
No, I'm good.
Okay, yes.
Would you like us, like, what was Korah's rebellion and, like, all that stuff going on?
You can mention that. That's all occurring in 15 through 19. It would be wonderful if you talked about in chapters 15 through 19, it'd be in 37 years. And like, for instance, that's when the people are bitter, and then that's when they have Korah's rebellion, which was a big deal back then. Remember Korah and Dathan? Remember the earth opens up and swallows up Dathan and Korah and everybody. And then the 250 leaders that also rebelled, men of renown. In other words, all the rulership, all the leaders in Israel rebelled against Moses. There was outright rebellion, and God killed every one of them, slaughtered every one of them to a man. And then God said, now you know who's in charge. The man I put in charge, Moses, he's the only one left. I mean, God, that's a paraphrase. That's basically what happened. The people could see that he was the only one left. So you all understand that in the 37 years, the first generation is dying off, and the second generation is growing up, or maybe even being born. Because you could be born in that 37. If you're born in the first year of the 37 years, when you enter the land, you're 37. You're a 37-year-old soldier in the army. Y'all see that? Right. So, any questions? You think in your Bible, if you would turn to Numbers chapter 20. Okay. In the next couple of weeks, like I'm going to wrap up Numbers today, and then we're going to be talking about Deuteronomy. There won't be any real questions on Deuteronomy, like on your paper, except for the fact that it was written the last month during the 40-year sojourn, or the last month of the 39th year of Numbers. But on the final test there will be, so I want to make sure I spend at least 2 weeks on the book of Deuteronomy, the second law. Deuteronomy, it's actually more interesting reading than the book of Leviticus. Leviticus is, you can study your way through Leviticus, but it's just hard to just read Leviticus. Anyway, in Numbers chapter 20, we're starting the second generation. In other words, we are now in the 40th year of the wilderness journey, and God is getting ready to take that second generation into the promised land. Does anybody know a euphemism for the promised land? What do they call it?
The land of milk and honey.
The land. Who said that? Good job, Austin. Does everybody know that? The land of milk and honey. It's mentioned some 22 times. 22 times in the scripture, the land of Canaan is called the land of milk and honey. Okay. So let's take a look at Numbers chapter 20. Remember, this could go, from here on, these things could be put into your paper, okay? Into your term paper that you're writing. Okay. Numbers 20, verse 1. Then the children of Israel, the whole congregation, came into the wilderness of Zin in the first month. The first month, in other words, the first month of the 40th year. They came into the wilderness of Zin in the first month, and the people stayed in Kadesh, and Miriam, in parentheses,
That's my girl.
Moses' sister, died there and was buried there. That's all it says about her. Okay. Does anybody remember another instance that happened to Miriam in the wilderness? The first year? Yes.
She got leprosy.
Did she just catch it, or was it given to her?
Her and Aaron, they were like bullying Moses because he married a Ethiopian.
An Ethiopian. Uh-huh.
And so, and then God, he was just like, hey, this is my dude, and he gave her leprosy. But
Yeah.
he didn't do it to Aaron because it was
Yeah. That was disqualified Aaron from being high priest. What's that? Yeah. So Miriam and Aaron were jealous of Moses. Remember, it was the first rebellion. It was a family rebellion. By the way, the rebellion of Korah, that was a tribal rebellion. The Korahites were Levites. They were priests, and they rebelled against Moses. Okay. What's that? Korah was a Levite.
Oh.
Korah was of the tribe of Levi. In other words, the Levitical priesthood rebelled against Moses, along with the 250 leaders of the entire nation rebelled against Moses. In other words, they were rebelling against God's constituted authority. So anyway, in the first month of the 40th year, Miriam dies and she was buried. Okay, now here is where we start running into problems with the second generation here, okay? So anyway, in verse 2, now there was no water for the congregation, so they gathered together against Moses and Aaron, and the people contended with Moses and spoke, saying, if only we had died when our brethren died before the Lord. Now they're saying, we should have died in the wilderness just like the first generation. In other words, they're really griping and complaining just like the first generation, okay? If only we had died when our brethren died before the Lord. Why have you brought up the assembly of the Lord into this wilderness that we and our animals should die here? And why have you made us come up out of Egypt to bring us to this evil place? It is not a place of grain or figs or vines or pomegranates, nor is there any water to drink. So Moses and Aaron went from the presence of the assembly to the door of the tabernacle of meeting, and they fell on their faces, and the glory of Jehovah appeared to them. This is going to be where God says, speak to the people and speak to the rock. In other words, talk to it. Don't hit it, just talk to it. Okay? This can be an incident that you put in for the second generation if you want. So God says, speak to the rock before their eyes, and it will yield its water. Thus you shall bring water from them out of the rock and give drink to the congregation and their animals. So Moses took the rod from before the Lord as he commanded him. And Moses and Aaron gathered the assembly together before the rock, and he said to them, here and now, you rebels, must we bring water for you out of this rock? Then Moses lifted up his hand and struck the rock twice with his rod, and water came out abundantly, and the congregation and their animals drank. Remember, the water that came out, it's enough to fill up a whole reservoir. In other words, Moses struck that rock twice, but remember, he broke God's commandment. God said, speak to it, and I'll cause the water to come out. But Moses said, must we bring you water out of this rock? And then he gets mad, and he takes his rod, and he just slams it against the cliff twice, the rock twice. And enough water comes up, of course, enough water to quench the thirst of 2 to 3 million people and hundreds of thousands of animals. So in other words, that's a lot of water coming out of that rock. God graciously lets the water come out, but then God says to Moses and Aaron, hey, psst, come over here. I got a word to speak with you. And then God says, because you disobeyed me, you and Aaron will not go, you will not lead the people into the promised land. So Aaron dies for the same reason. So in verse 12, the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron because you did not believe me to hallow me, in other words, make me holy in the eyes of the children of Israel, therefore you shall not bring this assembly into the land which I have given them. This was the water of Meribah, because the children of Israel contended with the Lord, and he was hallowed among them. So I'm going to skip over. Israel goes up to the land of Edom. Remember, Edom is Esau. Esau was Jacob's brother. And Esau, refuses to let Israel pass through the land. And this is going to cause another problem. Because they aren't allowed to go through the land of Edom, they got to take the long way around. And the people are going to start griping about that. Because now they have to walk back into the wilderness to walk around the entire country of Edom. Anyway, but before that happens, in verse 23, it says, by the way, starting at verse 20, then he said, you shall not pass through. So Edom came out against them with many men and with a strong hand. Thus Edom refused to give Israel passage through his territory, so Israel turned away from him. Now we talk about the death of Aaron, again in chapter 20. Now the children of Israel, the whole congregation, journeyed from Kadesh and came to Mount Hor. And Jehovah spoke to Moses and Aaron in Mount Hor by the border of the land of Edom, saying, quote, Aaron shall be gathered to his people, for he shall not enter the land which I have given to the children of Israel, because you rebelled against my word at the water of Meribah. Take Aaron and Eleazar his son, and bring them up to Mount Hor, and strip Aaron of his garments, and put them on Eleazar his son. In other words, Eleazar is now going to be the high priest. For Aaron shall be gathered to his people and die there. In other words, Aaron's going to go to heaven, but he's not going to go to the promised land. So Moses did just as Jehovah commanded, and they went up to Mount Hor in the sight of all the congregation. Moses stripped Aaron of his garments and put them on Eleazar his son, and Aaron died there on the top of the mountain. Then Moses and Eleazar came down from the mountain. Now when all the congregation saw that Aaron was dead, all the house of Israel mourned for Aaron 30 days. Okay, so that's the death of Miriam and Aaron. And now there's a little section here. Chapter 21 starts off kind of like where chapter 14. Remember, the Israelites were going to go into the wilderness, but they refused to go in. And then when God said, don't go in, some of the people said, hey, we're going in anyway. You know, they changed their mind. But Moses said, no, don't go in. Now you're disobeying the Lord because he said, don't go in. And they tried to go in right at the same point that happens here in chapter 21. So they're going to utterly destroy the people that attacked them and defeated them 37 years before. Yes?
I have a question. So wait, because Jesus hasn't come yet, don't they not go to heaven? Don't they go to Abraham's bosom?
Yeah, I was just trying to simplify. Yes, they would technically go to Abraham's bosom, which is paradise, which is, say at that time, in the... By the way, and not everybody believes this, but according to Luke chapter 16, that's what it teaches. Say, here's the center of the earth, and in other words, it's all Hades, you know, the place of the dead, but there's paradise, and there's torments, and there's like a great rift between them, you know, and like in Luke 16, it talks about Lazarus being in Abraham's bosom, and there's the rich man, you know, like say, lifting up his eyes in torment. But yet when Christ, the thief on the cross, you know, remember Jesus says, today you shall be with me in paradise. You know, the thief that repented. Jesus died, and again, not everybody believes this, but Jesus descended into hell. You know, another name for that is hell. He descended into Hades. And of course, the repentant thief on the cross also went down to paradise. During the ascension, paradise was removed. In other words, the paradise was emptied out. All those souls in paradise were removed and taken up into heaven with Jesus, so that now from our perspective, absent from the body, at home, present with the Lord. So now everybody's up in heaven. But not everybody believes that. I believe it, but some people would dispute that. But I would agree with what you just said. That they presently we're in heaven. There is nobody in paradise. Paradise was emptied and taken to heaven. But when unbelievers die, they still go to torments, which is the local county jail. Because remember in Revelation 21, it says that death and Hades is cast into the lake of fire. In other words, Hades is cast into Gehenna, which is the second death. So this is like the local county jail. They're awaiting to go before the judge. He will pass sentence, and the judge sentences them to an eternity in the lake of fire. Okay. That's a good question. That's I was trying to simplify, and I was actually being, in my own mind, theologically incorrect, and you caught it. I'm glad. Nail me to the wall when I make a mistake. That's good.
Well, since it's a big debate, you don't know if you made a mistake.
What's that?
Since it's a big debate.
I don't think it's not. Well, it's not like it's a big debate, but there's just like a lot of people believe that. For instance, Moses and Elijah, when they appear, did they come up out of Hades, or did they? It's just, I just believe Luke 16 teaches that before the cross, that's where believers went. Okay, so in Numbers chapter 21. I want to read this first part just so you can see that the first part of taking the land is actually occurring when Moses is still here. There's a lot of things that Moses is he's going to get rid of the Canaanites that are on the east side of the Jordan River. In other words, a lot of giants live east of the Jordan. And Moses and Israel, they're going to destroy a lot of those big people. In other words, they're going to kill off a whole race of giants, exterminate them. Og, king of Bashan. Og, his bed was 13 feet long. He was a big guy. It's just not that he was an average sized guy who liked really big beds. He needed a 13-foot bed because they were giants, okay? So anyway, in chapter 21, verse 1, the king of Arad, the Canaanite who dwelt in the south, heard that Israel was coming on the road to Atharim. Then he fought against Israel and took some of them prisoners. So Israel made a vow to Jehovah and said, if you will indeed deliver this people into my hand, then I will utterly destroy their cities. And the Lord listened to the voice of Israel and delivered up the Canaanites, and they utterly destroyed them in their cities. So the name of that place was called Hormah. Okay, now here's the important one, and we'll actually go to the New Testament to look at it. So if you want to, this is a good event to write about because it's a short passage. It only goes, say, from 21:4 all the way through 8. And I'm going to go ahead and read it. Then we'll flip over to John chapter 3 so that you can even bring in a New Testament reference if you want. Okay, so this is the incidents of the bronze serpent. Then they journeyed from Mount Hor by the way of the Red Sea to go around the land of Edom, and the soul of the people became very discouraged on the way. In other words, they were sick to death of the extra walking they had to do. Instead of going through Edom, they had to walk around Edom. And the people spoke against God and against Moses, and here's what they say. Why have you brought us up out of Egypt to die in the wilderness? For there is no food and water, and our soul loathes this worthless bread. What are they talking about? The manna. 39 years of eating, well, 40, they're in their 40th year of eating manna, and they are sick to death of it. They are just utterly sick to death of it. So they say, we loathe this food that God has been giving to us. So the Lord sent fiery serpents among the people, and they bit the people, and many of the people of Israel died. Therefore the people came to Moses and said, we have sinned. By the way, they said we ought to die. Why don't we just die? So God says, okay, I'll let you die right here. And then they say, oh my God, we're dying, so we've got to do something about this. Okay. But aren't you really irrational when you're complaining anyway? When you complain, you usually think about it, even when you yourselves complain, not that any of you have ever complained about anything, but think about when you do complain, how easy it is to exaggerate and become irrational. In other words, you're no longer seeing truth as a reality. By the way, that's also the definition of insanity. You actually no longer see the truth as being reality, and that's called insanity. Okay, therefore the people came to Moses, verse 7, and said, "We have sinned, for we have spoken against Jehovah and against you. Pray to Jehovah that he take away the serpents from us." So Moses prayed for the people. Then Jehovah, or the Lord, said to Moses, "Make a fiery serpent and set it on a pole, and it shall be that everyone who is bitten, when he looks at it, shall live." So Moses made a bronze serpent and put it on a pole, and so it was, if a serpent had bitten anyone, when he looked at the bronze serpent, he lived. Okay, so Moses made a bronze serpent. Okay, remember, a serpent, a picture of Satan. Remember, the serpent was more crafty than all the beasts of the fields which the Lord God had made. You know, that's Genesis chapter 3, verse 1. So bronze, how do you spell bronze? Z-E? Is the metal for judgment. Always in the scripture, bronze always represents judgment. So you see anything made out of brass, say, brass or bronze. Sometimes a translation will say brass. It always represents judgment, okay? So the serpent was made out of bronze. In other words, the serpent representing Satan, representing sin, is being judged, and is being judged on a pole. In other words, a tree. And what do the Israelites have to do in order to be saved from their snake bite? Go ahead and say that again. No, go ahead. No, you speak up.
The bronze serpent.
Yeah. So is that exercising faith?
Yeah.
Yeah. In other words, it is exercising faith. In other words, the bronze serpent has been made. You could have been bitten by, let's just say, Destiny was bitten by a snake, by one of these fiery nakashes. Okay, nakash is the Hebrew term. She has been bitten, and so the word goes out. If you just look at that brass serpent up on a hole, lift it high up so that you can see it, you'll live. And so Destiny says, I'm not going to go look at any stinking serpent on a pole. In other words, and all she has to do to live is just roll her eyeballs and take a look. If she has enough faith to just roll her eyeballs in her peripheral vision and see that serpent, if she has that much faith to just look at it. In other words, Destiny could say, well, I don't know if it's going to work, but hey, that won't take any effort to look at it. So you just roll your eyes, you're breathing in pain from the snake bite, and she looks at it, oh, the pain is gone. I'm well. If she has that much faith just to look, she's saved. Okay, so who uses that as an example of salvation? Okay. In Sunday school, Jesus is the answer to like 3/4 of the questions, right? You ever do that? Like you teach a second grade or first grade and you ask a question, and so one of the kids will raise their hand and they'll say, God? Okay. Yeah. I used to, when my son was, my son's 40 now, but when he was like 4 years old and he's in a young class, I remember his teacher, she thought it was so funny, she came and told us, she said, I was talking about the God being the light of the world and how God's light shines. So our son was just looking up. I don't see him. Okay. It was just funny. Yeah. Yeah, kids are very little. Says, I don't see nothing. Okay. So John chapter 3. Oh, my little off the subject, but my daughter and son-in-law, my son and daughter, when he was 5 years old. No, she was 5 years old and he was 7. And we're driving to Lake Tahoe or Reno or something like that, and they're having this theological discussion in the back. In fact, she was 4 and he was 6, and our son had learned enough. He says, God loves everybody. He's a God of love. He just loves everybody. And our daughter Sharon said, "Nah, he's a killer. He kills everything that there is." Because she was hearing about the judgment of God. But it was just funny hearing this 4-year-old and 6-year-old argue about. One was saying God is a killer, and the other one said, "No, he's a God of love." And they were just. My wife and I were just listening to this argument, heated, deep theological debate going on in the back seat. My daughter kept saying, "No, he's a killer." No, our son would say, "No, he's a God of love." "No, he's a killer. He kills everybody." Okay, that's a
Sad way to look.
yeah. She's the one that lives here in Carbon, has 5 kids now. Okay, John chapter 3. Okay. And if you write about this incident in your paper, it's on the witness to Nicodemus. Anybody know what verse that is? What's that?
Isn't it 13?
No one who has ascended to heaven, but he who came down from heaven. So that's not that one.
No,
14.
14.
And as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, even so must the Son of Man be lifted up, that whoever believes in him should not perish, but have eternal life. Okay. So in other words, God is setting up a model. In other words, God specifically tells Moses, fashion a brass serpent, put it on a pole, and lift it up so everybody can see it. And everybody who sees it, if they have faith enough to look at it, they'll live. Quite literally, faith, in other words, salvation in just a look. If you have enough faith to just look at it, you'll be saved. So Jesus uses that very same example. In other words, God set up that model. The Son of Man will be lifted up on a cross. Whoever believes in him, looks to him for salvation, will be saved. So there you have a New Testament application that you could put in your paper if you wanted to. In other words, you're seeing the Old Testament is our examples and stuff. God set up models and everything. Good. So that's what kind of like happens there. Okay, and then later on, chapter 21, verse 21, chapter 21, 33. We have kings, there's Sihon and Og. When you say the name Og, what do you think of? Caveman or something like that? The what?
Original gangster.
That's something that's drawing board from Wizard of Oz, but
Oh.
you suggested Og.
And they said Og sounds, well, no, let's do Oz. That sounds better, right?
I don't like Wizard of Oz.
By the way, you realize the general theme of the Bible, whether you're a believer or unbeliever, it's the theme of almost every movie out today. What does Genesis say? There's the dragon, the serpent, and what's the whole plot of the Bible? The knight in shining armor comes along, slays the dragon, and saves the girl, right? I mean, isn't it the theme for most movies, that you see today? The dragon is slain, evil is put away, and then the girl is saved, whether she's a princess or whatever. This is a theme of all your fairy tales and all that stuff. The dragon is slain. What's that? Yeah. And so basically, whether you're a believer or unbeliever, it ends up being the theme all the way through history of so many stories. That's the theme because it's the original theme in the Bible. Now, did I make that up or did I figure that out for myself? No. But the guy that used to be on Growing Pains, what's his name?
Cameron.
Who?
Kirk Cameron.
Yeah, Kirk Cameron. He said it. I heard him say it. When I was at a conference a couple of weeks back. By the way, Kirk Cameron. I know if you've seen him on that show on Growing Pains, he has 6 kids now. But he's still, I mean, he's a really vibrant Christian for the Lord. He goes to John MacArthur's church.
Kirk Cameron?
Yeah.
Didn't he just recently like get in a debate and wasn't able to defend the gospel or something?
No, that was
Was that the other dude?
The dude?
The other guy that's in do you know what I'm talking about? The two guys that do the evangelizing shows.
why can't I remember his
The Way of the Master. Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, no, it was just he just used best arguments, but still.
That's right.
Well, you're not going to win every debate, but as the word of God goes out, I mean, God will bless it. By the way, some people believe and some don't. I mean, Paul, when he argued on the Areopagus, it said a few believed. I mean, when Peter preached, 3,000 came to the Lord the first day. But in the age in which we live, we're looking at a whole world, full of like we're on the Areopagus, the whole world. A few believe. And like say, literally, you've got to like preach creation first to get people in the right ballpark and everything. Paul preached creation first, and then he preached the gospel. He had to tell people who the God was, that the unknown God was who they worshipped. Anyway, King Sihon defeated. I'm going to read a little bit about King Og. Okay. The reason I'm going to read about King Og is because it's a name you can remember. I mean, if you said Oz, I mean, you're close, right? Okay. So, verse 33. And they turned and went up by the way to Bashan. So Og, king of Bashan, went out against them, he and all his people, to battle at Edrei. Then Jehovah said to Moses, do not fear him, for I have delivered him into your hand with all his people and his land. And you shall do to him as you did to Sihon, king of the Amorites, who dwelt at Heshbon. So they defeated him, his sons, and all his people until there was no survivor left in him, and they took possession of his land. That's all it says. And you have to read, if you want to find out about how big Og was, you got to turn to the book of Deuteronomy. And there it's going to mention that he was a giant, okay? Okay, and then in chapters 22, 23, 24, 25, it's going to talk about the story of Balak and Balaam. And it's chapters 22, 23, 24, and maybe 25, I think. But this is an instance that's mentioned numerous times in the New Testament. It's mentioned in Revelation, it's mentioned in the book of Jude, it's mentioned in 2 Peter. Because of the sin, because of how Balaam was able to teach Balak, the king of Moab, how to get that second generation of Israelites to sin. He said, hey, just take out your good-looking women and just send them into the camp. I guarantee you Israel will sin. They'll commit adultery with them, or they'll commit fornication with them. They'll start to worship their gods, and God will be forced to judge Israel. And so that was Balaam's advice. In other words, the doctrine of Balaam. The doctrine of Balaam has to do with basically sexual sin. So let's go ahead and take a 10-minute break. Okay, we're going to talk about the story of Balak, how Balak sends for Balaam, the false prophet. So there's a lot of debates about Balaam, about was he a prophet of God? Because actually, God spoke to him, and Balaam called God, he called him Jehovah and stuff, although he didn't have a personal relationship with him, he used the name. So I'm going to read part of it, and then you kind of realize that it covers chapters 22, 23, and 24. And we are going to go over especially chapter 25 about the results of what Balaam did. But first we're going to look at the story of why he's even here to begin with. So in Numbers chapter 22, we have the story of Balak. I mean, think about this. Is going to be like, anybody ever seen the movie, the cartoon movie Shrek?
Yeah.
Okay. Remember the talking donkey? Eddie Murphy? Well, there's There's a talking donkey in this one too. Okay. So there's Balak, or Balak, or you know.
Everybody loves cakes.
Cakes off my face.
Yeah. Yeah. Me and Eddie Murphy are the same age, by the way.
Really?
Basically, you're related.
Huh?
Basically, you're related.
Related?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're all sons of Noah, right? Is that how you meant?
Yes, it is.
In some of his movies, he used to wear a jacket that said 67 on it. I'm assuming that's the year he graduated from high school. That's the year I graduated from high school. 1967. What's that?
We're all marrying our cousins in some form.
Except, I mean, like your 50th or 100th cousins or something like that. Okay, then the children of Israel moved and camped in the plains of Moab on the side of the Jordan across from Jericho. Remember, here's the place now where I mentioned before, Balak, king of Moab, he's on a cliff, he's overlooking the camp of Israel. And remember, if you take this literally, what does Balak see? See, he's up there on a cliff, high up, he's high up in the air, and here's Balak, king of Moab. Okay, that's the king. He's up there on Moab. I mean, he's in Moab, overlooking the camp of Israel. And what he sees when he looks at the camp of Israel, when they're camped out, he sees them basically, looking like this. I can't draw it. You have to look it down. Basically, he's seeing like this, what we would say is a giant cross. That's what the encampment of Israel looks like. And so, this is kind of the context. He's overlooking, and so he gets fearful of the nation of Israel. So the children of Israel moved and camped in the plains of Moab on the side of the Jordan across from Jericho. Now, can everybody remember who Moab is? Where do they get their origin?
From Lot's daughter.
From
Whoa.
No is a good answer, but it's not specific enough. Isaac, you started to answer first.
Lot's daughter, or Lot's daughter.
One of Lot's, remember, Lot's two daughters had incest with their father. And in other words, they got their father drunk so that he would get them pregnant. Kind of gross, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
kind of.
Just a
What's
little.
that? Kind of, yeah.
Not really.
My cousin.
So anyway, Moab and Ammon, those two countries, basically they were founded upon an incestuous relationship. Now Balak, the son of Zippor, by the way, Moses' wife's name was Zipporah, and they mean the same thing. One's masculine, one's feminine. It means little bird. Zipporah, Moses' first, well, not the Ethiopian, but the Midianite woman. It was a little female bird. Balak, the son of Zippor. Zippor means masculine little bird, a little baby boy bird. Saw all that Israel had done to the Amorites. And Moab was exceedingly afraid of the people because they were many, and Moab was sick with dread because of the children of Israel. So Moab said to the elders of Midian, now this company will lick up everything around us as an ox licks up the grass of the field. And Balak, the son of Zippor, was king of the Moabites at that time. Then he sent messengers to Balaam, the son of Beor, at Pethor, which is near the river and in the land of the sons of his people, to call him, saying, look, a people has come from Egypt. See, they cover the face of the earth and are settling next to me. Therefore, please come at once. Curse this people for me, for they are too mighty for me. Perhaps I shall be able to defeat them and drive them out of the land, for I know that he whom you bless is blessed, and he whom you curse is cursed. So that's the context. So Balak sends for Balaam. It's a lot of B words, right? Balaam of son of Beor. Anyway, so the elders of Moab and the elders of Midian departed with the diviner's fee. In other words, they had to pay the guy who was going to curse them. with a diviner's fee in their hand, and they came to Balaam and spoke to him the words of Balak. And he said to them, lodge here tonight, and I will bring back word to you as the Lord speaks to me. So the princes of Moab stayed with Balaam. Then God came to Balaam and said, who are these men with you? So Balaam said to God, Balak, the son of Zippor, king of Moab, has sent to me, saying, look, a people has come out of Egypt, and they cover the face of the earth. Come now, curse them for me. Perhaps I shall be able to overpower them and drive them out. And God said to Balaam, you shall not go with them. You shall not curse the people, for they are blessed. So Balaam rose in the morning and said to the princes of Balak, go back to your land, for the Lord has refused to give me permission to go with you. And the princes of Moab rose and went to Balak and said, Balaam refuses to come with us. Then Balak again sent princes more numerous and more honorable than they, and they came to Balaam and said to him, thus says Balak the son of Zippor, please let nothing hinder you from coming to me, for I will certainly honor you greatly, and I will do whatever you say to me. Therefore please come, curse this people for me. So you figure Balaam has had a pretty good reputation, huh? He curses somebody, and boy, it's bad news for you. Balaam answered and said to the servants of Balak, though Balak were to give me his house full of silver and gold, I could not go beyond the word of the Lord of my God to do less or more. Now therefore, please you also stay here tonight, that I may know what more the Lord will say to me. In other words, they're bringing him more money, so he says, let me ask God again. Maybe God has changed his mind. So God came to Balaam at night and said to him, if the men come to call you, rise and go with them, but only the word which I speak to you, that you shall do. So Balaam rose in the morning and saddled his donkey and went with the princes of Moab. So first God is, like God says, don't curse this people. But Balaam says, hey God, let me ask you again, can I, they're offering me a lot of money, can I please curse this people? So God says, okay, go ahead and go, but you're going to say what I say. Then God's anger was aroused because he went. God says to go, then so he goes. But remember, God sends meat to the Israelites, and when the meat was in their, as it was in their teeth, God got angry and struck them with plague, remember? In other words, they knew that they were displeasing God, and so as soon as they bit down on the, the quail. Anybody ever had quail before? Usually when you have quail, you got to spit out the buckshot, right? Huh? I mean, that's how people used to get wild birds. Anyway, what's that?
Spit out the what?
Buckshot?
Bullets. The bullets.
The bullets?
Oh, okay.
The little pellets, the little tiny lead pellets. Okay. Because remember, lead's poisonous. Okay. God's anger was aroused because he went, and the angel of the Lord. Who is that? But Jesus. It's Jesus, but how is he Jesus?
In pre-incarnate form of Jesus.
Who said that? You said that? You said, okay. You all agree that he is the pre-incarnate Christ? Okay. So it is... could we say that the angel of Jehovah is in fact Jehovah?
Yeah.
Would you say that?
Yes.
Okay. All of you you guys are sharp today. What is it?
Coffee for days.
Candy.
Coffee?
Breakfast.
You didn't eat breakfast? That's the key? Okay. So the angel okay. What does angel mean?
Messenger.
And what does Lord mean? All capitals?
Jehovah.
Jehovah.
Jehovah. Come on, guys, get your fingers ready.
Yeah, and you're right. It would actually be this. Or Yahweh, modern Hebrew. This letter right here, if you're a European Jew, you say this, Wah. But if you're a Sephardi, in other words, what they speak in Israel today, you say this. Say Vav instead of Wah. So you don't say Yahweh. It's that song Yahweh, Yahweh is really Yahweh, Yahweh.
I'm gonna start singing that in worship.
What's that?
I'm gonna start saying that when we sing
Yeah.
the song.
And if you're Jewish or some Christian religions, that would be a sacrilege for you to sing that because you can't pronounce the unpronounceable name of God, so you would say Adonai. You would substitute the words Adonai for this. Anyway, remember it's this, and then here's your, that the vav right there, a yod, a hey, a vav, and a hey. That tetragrammaton, this is your theological message about God today. So the messenger of Jehovah, who is in fact Jehovah himself. In other words, Jesus is the messenger for his Father. Jehovah Jesus is the messenger for Jehovah the Father.
So he's not actually an angel, but he's just a messenger.
Angel means messenger. It's just that some messengers are spiritual beings, and that's in English we've changed what angel means. We always think of a supernatural creature, or in our pop culture, if it's not a supernatural creature, it's if you're a guy, it's your girlfriend.
Yeah.
Your angel. But of course, in the Bible, all angels are masculine. There are no female angels. They're all masculine. There is not one single feminine angel in the Bible. It's only in our culture where I used to call my wife when we were dating, "You're my angel." And when we lived in the South, I said, "Sugar pie, sugar lamb, honey dumpling." Just yeah. What's that? Sugar dumpling. Yeah. Okay. So we all realize Jehovah Jesus is visiting Balaam in his pre-incarnate form. Okay. Okay. Here we go. We were back in the text here. The angel of Jehovah, or the messenger of Jehovah, took his stand in the way as an adversary against him. And he was riding on his donkey, and his two servants were with him. Now the donkey saw the angel of the Lord, Jehovah, standing in the way with his drawn sword in his hand, and the donkey turned aside out of the way and went into the field. So Balaam struck the donkey to turn her back onto the road. So he beat his female donkey, right? It's a female donkey. Then the angel of Jehovah stood in a narrow path between the vineyards with a wall on this side and a wall on that side. And when the donkey saw the angel of Jehovah, she pushed herself against the wall and crushed Balaam's foot against the wall, so he struck her again. Then the angel of the Lord went further and stood in a narrow place where there was no way to turn, either to the right hand or to the left. And when the donkey saw the angel of Jehovah, she lay down under Balaam. So Balaam's anger was aroused, and he struck the donkey with his staff. So cruelty to animals, right?
Peter, where
The Bible does show animal cruelty, is against animal cruelty.
That's right. By the way, in the law, God specifically states that you will not be cruel to your animals. So Jehovah opened the mouth of the donkey, and she said to Balaam, "What have I done to you?" I need a female to read this. Anybody got that turn? You got it open there?
He talks like a donkey.
Don't have to talk like a donkey. You're going to talk like a woman. You want to read it?
What verse are we on?
We're on 28.
Not a hick.
How far do you want me to go?
Just read the second part of the verse.
What have I done to you that you have struck me these 3 times?
Good. Okay. I like that.
You're welcome.
Oh yeah.
And Balaam said to the donkey, because you have abused me, I wish there were a sword in my hand, for now I would kill you. So the donkey said to Balaam, okay,
Is that 30?
yeah.
Am I not your donkey on which you have ridden? Ever since I became yours to this day, was I ever disposed to do this to you?
And he said, no. And the Lord opened Balaam's eyes, and he saw the angel of the Lord standing in the way with his drawn sword in his hand. And he bowed his head and fell flat on his face. And the angel of the Lord said to him, why have you struck your donkey these 3 times? Behold, I have come out to stand against you, because your way is perverse before me. The donkey saw me and turned aside from me these 3 times. If she had not turned aside from me, surely I would also have killed you by now and let her live. And Balaam said to the Lord, said to the angel of the Lord, I have sinned, for I did not know that you stood in the way against me. Now, therefore, if it displeases you, I will turn back. Now, what's strange about this story?
Well, the donkey's talking.
Um,
Oh, we're raising it.
God told him to go.
well, destiny.
The donkey talks.
Okay,
And
but
he
what's
didn't
even
notice.
stranger?
And he didn't-
It's he never noticed that he was having a conversation with the donkey.
Maybe he thought he was one.
He was tripping.
You know what? He was probably, hitting up too much of that wine or herbs.
Herbs.
Up those herbs.
Wine
and he
didn't
just
have that
thought
much
he was
alcohol in
just
it.
fine.
Well, it did. Well, this is after the flood, so they could get drunk.
I know, but didn't
I
it
hear
take a
more
lot of
about-
wine
I
to
hear
get drunk
more
then?
about-
Uh,
With the alcohol?
if they didn't water it down, then they could get drunk from it. Pretty easy. But it's the fact that he wasn't even surprised that his donkey was speaking to him.
Maybe he was smoking some type of herbal chai stuff.
So I mean, to me the strange thing is that he's having this conversation, and he's not even surprised. And Destiny brought this out. He's not even surprised that he's having a conversation with his donkey.
So in other words, it could be like your anger may not even see the miracle.
He was
Yeah.
insane. He was insane.
Well, but he was seeing reality. The donkey was speaking with him. But it's just the fact that he wasn't aghast that he was having a conversation with the donkey. I mean, you can talk to your pet. Lots of people talk to their pets. I mean, listen to Eileen talk to her dog. And we all talk to our pets. You don't expect your pet to speak back to you, though, right? What?
He says that Zoe talks back.
Yeah.
He's seen it.
But not in English.
She thinks Zoe has a huge crush on Sarge.
And dog.
What's that?
She thinks
My
that
dog
Zoe has a
accepted
huge
the
crush
word.
on Sarge, the big black dog that walks around.
It could be. Yeah. Okay.
Just got weird.
Can anybody now?
Too far.
This is in the law. This is in the Torah. This is in the Pentateuch. If I was to ask Lauren, what other instance in the Torah or the Pentateuch or even in the whole Bible is there a record of a human being talking to an animal?
Oh.
No, you're gonna.
Serpent.
The serpent speaking to who?
No,
To,
no, he was
Adam
talking
and
to the animal.
Or to Eve.
To Eve, right? So there's the first recorded instance of a human being talking to an animal is a woman. And by the way, a female human being is speaking to a male animal, and now a male human being is having a conversation with a female donkey.
So there's.
Balance. That's all I can
Oh,
bring
I
up.
was thinking. Never mind.
Okay, don't look for any theological insights in that. It's just an observation that I made.
Okay, well, the word says that the Lord opened up the donkey's mouth.
hmm
What does that mean?
It means he gave the donkey the ability to speak in English.
In English?
or well, in Hebrew, or
In
and Moabite talk, the Moabite tongue. Yeah, it's as probably as similar to Hebrew as Spanish is to French. Okay, I really loved your southern accent for the donkey. That was good.
That came within the depth.
Out of the depths of your own being. Huh?
It was
Yeah.
under the influence of the Holy Spirit.
Was that the Holy Spirit you were
I
speaking
didn't
in?
feel like it just came out. I didn't have to put any effort
Oh,
into it.
speaking into a tongue.
Speaking the
Boy,
tongue
you
of donkeys.
would really fit. You could move to Florida,
Florida?
and you would just blend right in, or Texas, or Texas.
No.
Oh.
Yeah. You'd fit
Have you been listening to like does Lauren speak in?
Laura doesn't have an accent.
Really?
No.
I know you can speak with an accent if you want
I
to.
say y'all sometimes, but
Hey,
I've never heard it.
Angels are masculine. So
Unfortunately.
But she was being a donkey. She was not the angel. She was the donkey.
My dad tells me
It was a female donkey.
to say.
Okay. All right, let's move on. So anyway, verse 35, the angel of Jehovah said to Balaam, go with the men, but only the word that I speak to you with you shall speak. So Balaam went with the princes of Balak. Now when Balak heard that Balaam was coming, he went out to meet him at the city of Moab, which is on the border at the Arnon, and the boundary of the territory. Then Balak said to Balaam, did I not earnestly send to you, calling for you? Why did you not come to me? Am I not able to honor you? And Balaam said to Balak, look, I have come to you. Now have I any power at all to say anything? The word that God puts in my mouth, that I must speak. So Balaam went with Balak, and they came to Kirjath Huzoth. Then Balak offered oxen and sheep, and he sent some to Balaam and to the princes who were with him. Balaam's going to give 3 prophecies. I'm only going to just look at the first one, because what we want to look at is the sin, the doctrine of Balaam that's going to be in the New Testament, because it's used as an example in the New Testament. Balaam said to Balak, chapter 23, build 7 altars for me here and prepare for me here 7 bulls and 7 rams. And Balak did just as Balaam had spoken, and Balak and Balaam offered a bull and a ram on each altar. Then Balaam said to Balak, stand by your burnt offering, and I will go. Perhaps Jehovah will come to meet me, and whatever he shows me, I will tell you. So he went to a desolate height, desolate height. And God met Balaam, and he said to him, I have prepared the 7 altars, and I have offered on each altar a bull and a ram. Then Jehovah put a word in Balaam's mouth and said, return to Balak, and thus you shall speak. So he returned to him, and there he was, standing by his burnt offering, and he and all the princes of Moab. And he took up his oracle and said, Balak, the king of Moab, brought me from Aram, from the mountains of the east. Come, curse Jacob for me, and come, denounce Israel. How shall I curse whom God has not cursed, and how shall I denounce whom the Lord has not denounced? For from the top of the rocks I see him, and from the hills I behold him. There a people dwelling alone, not reckoning itself among the nations. Who can count the dust of Jacob, or number 1/4 of Israel? Let me die the death of the righteous, and let my end be like this. Then Balak said to Balaam, what have you done to me? I took you to curse my enemies, and look, you have blessed them bountifully. So he answered and said, must I not take heed to speak what the Lord has put in my mouth? And so Balak is going to ask him to do the same thing again. It's just amazing to me that Balak keeps jacking up the pricing. I'll give you more and more money. You need to curse Israel for me. So anyway, he goes all the way through and builds more altars, more sacrifices, but each time out comes a blessing. So finally, yes.
like in the end, wouldn't it just be like words, since God's like not really like part of it? So like.
But God is part of it. God is the one who's giving the blessing.
I know, but okay, he wants him to curse him, right?
Balak wants Balaam to curse Israel.
Exactly, but.
But God, what he's doing, he's showing Balak that Israel is being cursed. Israel is being blessed rather than cursed. So God is actually speaking through Balaam, a false prophet. but he's making Balaam bless Israel instead of curse them. So actually, there's like, there's one messianic prophecy, so like in the fourth prophecy of Balaam. So he took his oracle and said, the utterance of Balaam, the son of Beor, and the utterance of the man whose eyes are opened, the utterance of him who hears the words of God and has the knowledge of the Most High. Who sees the vision of the Almighty? Who falls down with eyes wide open? I see him, but not now. I behold him, but not near. A star shall come out of Jacob. A scepter shall rise out of Israel. So here you have a messianic prophecy saying that the Messiah, the seed of the woman, basically is going to come out of Jacob or out of Israel. Okay. So basically, again, it's like not 3 times, but 4 times there's a blessing that goes to Israel. So Balaam rose and departed and returned to his place. Balak also went his way. Now, there's something that there has to be a way now for Balak to be able to get Israel to sin. God has blessed Israel these 4 times, through Balaam. So in other words, Balak tried to get a curse out of Balaam's mouth. You need an official curser, one with power in order to put a hex on a whole nation, and that wasn't happening. So something has to happen in order for God to be forced to judge Israel. So in other words, they somehow have got to get Israel to sin. So chapter 25. Now Israel remained in Acacia Grove, and the people began to commit harlotry with the women of Moab. They invited the people to go to the sacrifices of their gods, and the people ate and bowed down to their gods. So Israel was joined to Baal of Peor, and the anger of the Lord was aroused against Israel. Then the Lord said to Moses, take all the leaders of the people and hang the offenders before the Lord out in the sun, that the fierce anger of the Lord may turn away from Israel. So here's how Israel is being forced to judge. Here's how God is being forced to judge Israel. Because they have joined with the Midianite women, and they're going to a worship festival, in other words, a celebration of Baal, of Peor. In other words, it's the god of that particular area, but he is Baal, the same god that Israel was accused of worshiping later on during the days of Elijah. And they're going to a worship service, a celebration. So in the worship services of Baal, what does that entail? Isaac, what does that entail?
I don't know.
Yes.
Sacrificing your kids.
You're kind of like missing the point. Okay. Then we're going to be looking at the doctrine of Balaam. When you have celebrations to the false deities like the Ashtaroth or Astarte or Baal,
It's sexual sin.
remember he's the god of thunder, the god of rain. He's the god of fertility, Astarte or the Asherah. They're the feminine version of Asherah. That's the goddess of fertility. Baal is the god of fertility. And so in order to really please Baal and the Asherah, or say Astarte, they have to emulate their god. So what they are doing is they're committing fornication. So basically, remember what God was always afraid of. You'll marry foreign women, you'll accept their gods, and then you'll start committing their sins. So what the Canaanites were doing when they became like their gods. So every time there was a celebration, it was a religious experience for the women to come out and to have sex during, with anybody, basically, during that time, because it was encouraged during the celebrations. Later on in history, like even in the times of Solomon, the times of Manasseh, during all the evil kings, they emulated what they did in Canaan, and they literally, when they celebrated these celebrations, basically at that time, women were dedicated to serve the god or the goddess, and so they might be temple prostitutes for 2 years of their life. In other words, they go into service to their god for 2 years, so basically they're prostitutes for 2 years, just basically giving their body away to anybody who wants them. And at the same time, there was male prostitutes doing the same thing because the women had to worship too, so they had sex with the male prostitutes. So in other words, Baal worship encouraged sexual immorality. The worship of the false deities always ended in sexual immorality. And then of course later, sacrificing their children and everything else too. So basically, remember what happened when they worshiped the golden calf? It turned into a sex orgy. Now they're worshiping Baal. Israel's being enticed to worship Baal, and it very quickly degenerates into sexual immorality. They're worshiping Baal, and you worship Baal by having sex. Do you see why it was, at the very least, it was so appealing to the men of the cultures of that day? By the way, wouldn't that appeal to, like, say, most unregenerate men today? Oh yeah, I'll be religious. Yeah, of course. And so, in other words, it had the national stamp of approval in order to have that kind of lifestyle, and God said no. God said destroy every one of them. Okay. So now Israel is committing harlotry in Moab with the Midianite women. So as I read this, chapter 25, you realize that as they are worshiping Baal, they express their worship in sexual immorality. That's what's going on, yes.
And this is the second generation, right?
This is the second generation.
Is most like the first generation gone by now?
Yeah, matter of fact, they're all gone.
Oh, so this is just with the second generation.
This is just the second generation. We are literally in the last, let me put up our timeline again. Remember, from chapter 20 to chapter 36, that's the second generation. Most people in the first generation have died off. And now we're dealing with the second generation. In other words, the pole was lifted up. Remember, it was that second generation complaining against God. Remember, they complained too. But God had promised that the second generation would go in. So during that 39-year period, here's the last year. Here's the first year. And the 39th year. From chapters 20 to 36, all that's taken place right there with the second generation. From chapter 20 on, in other words, the serpent on the pole, all that stuff is happening in the 39th year of Numbers, or the 40th year in the wilderness. It's all happening in that second generation. So Israel, even though Balaam blessed Israel 4 times, there had to be a way. How are we going to get God to curse Israel? Well, you got to cause them to sin. So they sent in their women. The women invited the men to come to a feast. And so they did. So that's the context of chapter 25. They're going to go to a feast of Baal, and they're going to celebrate. They're going to join in the festivities, which includes always includes sexual immorality. So anyway, it says, and the people ate and bowed down to their gods. That's verse 2. So Israel, let me read verse 1 again. Israel remained in Acacia Grove, and the people began to commit harlotry with the women of Moab. So anybody know what harlotry is? Everybody know?
Yes.
Okay. They invited the people to go to the sacrifices of their gods, and the people ate and bowed down to their gods. So Israel was joined to Baal of Peor, and the anger of Jehovah was aroused against Israel. So the women come in, they entice them in, they immediately start having sexual intercourse. And so now, and when they're doing that, they are now joined to Baal. In other words, they have identified themselves with Baal. Remember, they already have the 10 Commandments. They already know that you shall not commit adultery, and they have in the book of Leviticus, it tells them that any type of sex outside of marriage is wrong. Okay, it deals with homosexual sin. It deals with sex with animals. In other words, all those things that the Canaanites were doing, God forbid. Okay, and now they've come and now they're committing sexual immorality. If this in the Septuagint, it would say porneia, where we get our word pornography. Then Jehovah said to Moses, verse 4, "Take all the leaders of the people and hang the offenders before Jehovah out in the sun, that the fierce anger of Jehovah may turn away from Israel." So Moses, in other words, this is God's instruction. He's telling Moses, tell them to hang the offenders so that I will not be forced to destroy everybody. So Moses said to the judges of Israel, "Every one of you kill his men who were joined to Baal of Peor." In other words, anybody that you catch in a sexual act, kill them. I mean, if they're having sex with a foreigner, kill them. And indeed, one of the children of Israel came and presented to his brethren a Midianite woman in the sight of Moses and in the sight of all the congregation of the children of Israel, who were weeping at the door of the tabernacle of meeting. The tabernacle is set up, Moses and Aaron are there, and now one of the offenders actually brings a Midianite woman who he had been having sex with right up to Moses. I mean, very brazenly just comes right up. In other words, flaunting the sin right in his face. Yeah.
Isn't Aaron dead?
I'm sorry, just Moses and Eleazar. Thank you. I have been nailed twice. Aaron is dead. Eleazar is the high priest. Okay. But it's going to be Phinehas, the grandson of Aaron, that's going to take action. And by the way, what Phinehas does will seem brutal, but what he did will ensure that the line of high priests will go through Aaron, through Eleazar, through Phinehas forever. In other words, the priesthood that offers sacrifices in the millennium will be descendants of Eleazar through Phinehas. That's how important this incident is actually going to be prophetically. So indeed, all the children of Israel came and presented to his brethren a Midianite woman in the sight of Moses, in the sight of all the congregation of the children of Israel, who were weeping at the door of the tabernacle of meeting. Now when Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron, the priest, saw it, he rose from among the congregation and took a javelin in his hand, and he went after the man of Israel into the tent and thrust both of them through, the man of Israel and the woman through her body. Pretty drastic action, right? This is the son of the high priest doing this. So the plague was stopped among the children of Israel, and those who died in the plague were 24,000. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron the priest, has turned back my wrath from the children of Israel, because he was zealous with my zeal among them, so that I did not consume the children of Israel in my zeal. Therefore say, behold, I give to him my covenant of peace, and it shall be to him and his descendants after him a covenant of an everlasting priesthood." So for instance, now when you go to Ezekiel chapter 40 through 48, it's the sons of Eleazar through Phinehas that are literally basically the priests, the high priests that are working in the temple during the millennium, serving before Jesus Christ personally. Aaron had two other sons. There was Eleazar and there was Ithamar. And remember, there's 24 orders of priests. 16 came through Eleazar and 8 came through Phinehas. 8 came through Ithamar. But it will be the descendants of Phinehas or through Eleazar who will actually minister forever. So that kind of shows that here. Now, we see this sin later on. So for instance, turning to the book of Revelation. So if you just hold your place in Numbers and flip over to the book of Revelation, we'll see a fulfillment here, because this particular sin is going to occur in the church.
Chapter?
Let's go chapter 4, let's do chapter 2. Okay, the first church, the church of Pergamos, Revelation 2, chapter 12. To the angel of the church in Pergamos write, these things says he who has the sharp two-edged sword. I know your works and there where you dwell, where Satan's throne is, and you hold fast to my name and did not deny my faith, even in the days in which Antipas was my faithful martyr, who was killed among you where Satan dwells. But I have a few things against you, because you have there those who hold the doctrine of Balaam, who taught Balak to put a stumbling block before the children of Israel, to eat things sacrificed to idols, and to commit sexual immorality. Thus you also have those who hold to the doctrine of the Nicolaitans, which I also hate, which is basically the same thing. In other words, they took into the church two doctrines that had at their center sexual immorality. It was okay to commit sexual immorality.
That's crazy.
Yep. So there you have it. Basically, it becomes a problem in the church. And so when you hear about the doctrine of Balaam, what is it? It was teaching the believers in God to eat meat sacrifice. In other words, idolatry expressed in the form of sexual immorality. That was a sin. And of course, it is the doctrine of Balaam from Numbers chapters 22 through 25 has found its way into the church. And since the 7 churches are also indicative of churches today, in other words, it's still a problem in the church, the doctrine of Balaam. So if you decide to write about the female donkey having a conversation with her master Balaam, you might mention the fact that the doctrine of Balaam is still in the church today. You know, it's talked about in the book of Revelation. And that's, of course, not the only place, but that's just, all you need is just one place. So in other words, things in the book of Numbers are represented in the New Testament. Any questions so far? Okay, let's take a 10-minute break. Okay, we're going to jump over to chapter 31. Remember, there was that the initial judgment in Israel where 24,000 Israelites die because they committed sexual sin. We all remember that. That's what we talked about in our last hour. And now vengeance is going to be taken on the Midianites in chapter 31. So Jehovah spoke to Moses, saying, take vengeance on the Midianites for the children of Israel. Afterward you shall be gathered to your people. In other words, God is saying, Moses, you're going to be dying pretty soon too. So anyway, going down to verse 7, and they warred against, W-A-R-R-E-D, they warred against the Midianites just as the Lord commanded Moses, and they killed all the males. In other words, the Midianites are being exterminated almost. They killed all the males. By the way, remember Moses' father-in-law is a Midianite. His first wife, Zipporah, she's a Midianite. They killed the kings of Midian with the rest of those who were killed. Evi, Rechem, Zur, Hur, and Reba, the 5 kings of Midian. Balaam, the son of Beor, they also killed with the sword. So Balaam got his in Numbers chapter 31, verse 8. Balaam is judged by God and he is killed. Verse 9, and the children of Israel took the women of Midian captive with their little ones, and took as spoil all their cattle, all their flocks, and all their goods. And they also burned with fire all the cities where they dwelt, and all their forts. And they took all the spoil and all the booty of man and beast. Okay, now down to verse 15. And Moses said to them, have you kept all the women alive? So what did the men do? They kept the women, okay? They says, wow, hey, we don't want to kill them. We can use them, so let's save them. So look, here's what Moses says. These women caused the children of Israel through the counsel of Balaam to trespass against the Lord in the incident of Peor, and there was a plague among the congregation of Jehovah. Now therefore, kill every male among the little ones. In other words, kill all the boy babies. Sounds cruel, right?
Sounds familiar.
But familiar, yes. And kill every woman who has known a man intimately. What is that saying?
Every single
Whoever's not a virgin.
Every woman who is not a virgin, you are to kill. I've always asked myself this question, how do they know? I don't know. I don't know how they checked, but I guess they had well, the men are dead, so it's just the women. I guess if the women had children, they knew automatically that the women weren't virgins because they had children. Only the males. They killed the boy babies, and they're letting the little girl babies live. Okay? But keep alive for yourselves all the young girls who have not known a man intimately. And as for you, remain outside the camp 7 days. Whoever has killed any person and whoever has touched any slain, purify yourselves and your captives on the 3rd day and on the 7th day. Purify every garment, everything made of leather, everything woven of goat's hair, and everything made of wood. So in other words, the only people left out of the nation of Midian is the young girls, and if they're the young women who have not had sexual relations. And basically, yes.
Oh, no.
Oh, I thought you're,
Wait, I do. What
Yeah.
chapter are we in? I lost.
chapter 31.
Oh, that's
Okay, and basically it's focusing on verses, chapter 31, verses 7 and 8. That's where they kill all the males. Okay, and then verse 15, 16, and 17, and 18, like verse 18. But keep alive for yourselves all the young girls who have not known a man intimately. Okay, and then basically, so the only people that's left of Midian at that point, or at least at that portion of Midian who was close to Israel, all that's left is young women who are virgins and little girls. That's all that's left. All the males of Midian have been put to the sword. And so typically, like when they're maybe at first the women will be concubines or something like that, but usually what's going to happen is that the men will end up marrying the women. So in other words, the Midianite women are going to be absorbed into the Israelite population, and basically the first generation of kids they're going to be Israelites, because all the women are going to be married to Israelite men. Okay, and then in chapter 33, yeah,
I'm so sorry. Quick question. Wasn't Moses' wife,
never apologize for a question. Go ahead.
wasn't Moses' wife from Midian?
Yes.
So her own people were slaughtered?
There's a couple of theories on that. Like Midian, the nation of Midian, remember they're children of Abraham also by his wife Keturah. Keturah meaning perfume. And so there were like say you come from the great state of Texas, right? But yet you don't come from El Paso.
He actually does come from.
That's right, you do come from El Paso. That's why. But you don't come from say like Andrews, Texas, or you didn't grow up in Magnolia, Texas, or Tomball, Texas, or something like that. Huh? Okay, so you didn't grow up in East Texas, you grew up in San Antonio, mid Texas. So like for instance, maybe there was a war between New Mexico and Texas. And so the people in New Mexico were commanded to slaughter all the Texans, from West Texas. And they're all slaughtered, but that doesn't include the population of Middle Texas and East Texas. East Texas looks like Louisiana, right? Basically, it's wet and wild down there. Yeah, swampy. And I know my sister, she lived north of Houston, and they lived surrounded by 2 lakes in a forest. Every kind of poisonous snake lived within a mile of them. So they had lots of cats, and there would be dead snakes everywhere, every day. So, cats they're deadly enemies of snakes. And so you have cats and you don't have copperheads and not cobras, but rattlesnakes, water moccasins.
Because they're really fast.
Because cats are they eat snakes. They kill them. Yeah.
That's the only reason why I get a cat.
Yeah. Well, if it's the choice of having a cat or being bitten by a rattlesnake or a viper or a cobra, not a cobra. Okay. So anyway, there is going to be a review. What I was saying was that part of Texas was wiped out, but not the rest of Texas, and quite possibly that section of Midian who was infiltrating Israel, but yet on the farther boundaries of Midian, they weren't involved, and so that part of Midian that was involved with the sin at Peor, they were wiped out. And so that part of the Midianite population was absorbed in the Israelite population. Okay. There's other laws that, like when the army takes captive enemy women, women who, basically it says you take the virgins and you take the young girls and you kill off all the males. You kill the males, I guess, because they're going to grow up and they're going to be your enemy again. Now, I guess that was the thinking back then. But the women would basically be absorbed into the population. And we haven't gone over a lot of those laws. I totally skipped over the laws about the army and all that stuff, which is, by the way, in Numbers and Deuteronomy. So, that almost brings us to the end. Chapter 33, there's just going to be a review of the entire wilderness journey. But I want to mention, were you raising your hand? No. Oh, okay. I thought it was like a double question because you had both hands sort of up. This is equivalent. This is equivalent to this, right?
No.
Sort of. Oh.
Sorry.
Okay.
Keep my head.
And you might note, if you want to know how old Aaron was, how much older he was than Moses, if you turn to Numbers chapter 33 and read verse 38, it states, "Then Aaron the priest went up to Mount Hor." Remember, it's a review of the entire wilderness journey in chapter 33. Now it's up to the death of Aaron. "Then Aaron the priest went up to Mount Hor at the command of the Lord, and died there in the 40th year after the children of Israel had come out of the land of Egypt, on the first day of the 5th month." It's telling you exactly when he died. So in other words, 7 months before the Israelites go into the land, Aaron dies. Then it says, Aaron was 123 years old when he died on Mount Hor. Now, Moses is going to live for 7 more months, and he dies at the age 120. But Aaron is 123, so he's about 3.5 years older than Moses. Miriam is supposed to be about 8 years older than Moses. She was like the big sister. Chapter 34. Just basically God he's telling them about what are going to be the borders of the land that they're going to inherit, and there's one other area I'm going to wait till we get into Deuteronomy to cover, and that's going to cover like, hey, what if 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 property is passed from father to son, what happens if he only has daughters and has no sons? And so there's going to be a law like the daughters of Zelophehad, that was the name of this particular man. He had 7 daughters but no sons. And so the daughters say, that means we have no inheritance because there are no sons. Does that mean we lose our inheritance? So they go up to Moses and they ask Moses, and Moses goes, that's a good question. So they take it to God, and God says, that's a good question. And so he's going to answer the question. It ends up being a really important chapter here and actually in Joshua and book of Joshua, book of Judges. Joshua, especially, where the inheritance is being passed out. These daughters, and all 7 daughters, their names are all listed. God lays down the law on how a woman is able to inherit in the land of Israel when there are no sons. So actually, for the very first time in human history, God is actually giving rights to women that women in no other place in the world had. In other words, they have property rights. They have the right to choose a husband, in levirate marriage and stuff. Basically, if her husband dies, she can say, I claim you. You're my husband. And, and if the guy doesn't say yes, it's a shameful thing for him in Israel. Remember, it's actually in the book of Ruth where guy's supposed to, take off his shoe and throw it and spit, and all that stuff. All these gross things that we would consider. So anyway, is there any questions on the book of Numbers? I kind of really raced through it. Remember chapter 26, remember they do the census again? Mm-hmm. So there's going to be there's a lot of laws in Numbers. There's a lot of laws in Deuteronomy, but when we get to Deuteronomy next week, there's going to be a lot of review of what happened. And it's going to talk about a lot in the first couple of chapters in Deuteronomy about the giants that were just killed off. And the different names for the giants, like the Ammon, the Zamzummim, the sons of Anak. In other words, all these different names that the different nations had for the giants and stuff. In other words, the giants were pretty prolific in that day. And of course, Israel's getting ready to go into the land to slay most of the other giants. Remember, under Joshua, they're going to slay all the giants in the land, but they don't quite get as far as Gath. Remember, where did Goliath come from? Gath. And David kills him. David's sons and brothers and stuff like that, they kill the rest of the giants and stuff, to where the giants become extinct for all intents and purposes. Any questions on anything that we've covered up to date? So you guys, nobody was eating any candy bars the last 20 minutes. Everybody here has crashed.
No, I ate like 10 during the break.
Oh, did you?
I'm good.
I'm waiting for everybody's head to fall to the table. You go up, because I know that's what was happening. Everybody's on a sugar high, and now you're crashing.
That explains why we were so talkative today.
What's that?
That explains why we were so talkative
Maybe
today.
we just need candy for this class.
What?
We just need candy, and then we'll be more.
James should
But then I'd be
like
contributing to your.
apples and
What's that?
oranges and stuff.
I've never had candy. It's okay.
Apples to apples. That's a great game.
Apples to apples? Okay. All right.
There should be 10 candy bars.
Everyone would use it.
All right. Well, if you guys don't have any questions, and who's actually ready to quit for the day? Who says we've had enough? All right. Jeff and Oscar, they don't want to leave, so we're going to continue for another hour. Okay, just kidding. Okay.
So,
All right. Jeff, you want to close this in a word of prayer?
Sure. Lord, thank you for today, and thank you for your word, and thank you for giving us the opportunity to learn it and to study it and apply it here. It's such a great environment, and I just pray that we wouldn't take it for granted. And I ask that you just go before us today, and that we would rely on you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.